There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies, science fiction films, the occasional fantasy film, perhaps a suspenseful film. We have broadened our horizons. But if you're used to us, then you already know this. David and I are old friends. We've been hosting this show for going on 6 years now, but we've been talking movies for much longer than I'd care to admit. And those of you coming back know this. That was for those of you that have not been with us. We hope you enjoy our show. We hope you stick around and find out. Maybe this is an introduction to you, because we are covering a classic fantasy film this time around.
Boy, are we.
Yeah, and I am here with my co-host and good friend, David Horton. David, how are you doing?
Good. I am doing well, stressed over work and stuff like that, like I always am. But hey, that's part of life.
Namaste.
For me.
Namaste.
Yes, I'm going to light a candle and maybe listen to some elven music or something. But no, I'm excited about this one. We normally start, of course, with what's been happening in our genre week, and you'll be happy to learn that I have taken some time to catch up on a bunch, and I'll do one a week as we go forward. I've seen actually 4 movies now that I can actually say, hey, what did you do in your genre week, David? And the one that I watched, or one I prepared for this week, is Voyage of the Demeter. I finally got to watch it.
That's on my list. I've been wanting to watch it.
Oh, you haven't seen it yet? So I would say I would recommend it. It's a very, what's a good way to say it? What works most about it is just the overall aesthetic. You feel this boat, and you feel both the breadth of the ocean and the confinement of this ship, and it's very well shot. It's very well filmed. It's directed by a guy I'd not heard of before, Andre Overdahl.
Yeah, you've heard of him.
I have.
Yeah, he did the Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Oh, that's it. Autopsy of Jane Doe. That's right. So if we ever put it on the list, I would add it to our list. It's an interesting, what I liked most from a writing perspective that you might appreciate was they basically took those, in Bram Stoker's novel, it's like what, maybe 2 chapters?
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of pages of the journal, the captain's log, essentially entries of this ship, and turned it into this full-length movie of what that would be like.
That, to me, is the most attractive thing about it, is that they take a tiny bit of a classic novel and expand on it. Just that one trip across the sea.
But it's visceral, it's gory, it's got good makeup, you would like it. The one thing negative I took away from you is there is no romanticism to the vampire at all. He is a creature and a monster all the way in it. There is no eloquence of the vampire myth in it. It is much more of, this is the beast.
That's curious, because I'm wondering why it didn't do well, and a lot of people don't like it. That's one of the reasons I haven't watched it yet, but I've told myself, just because others don't like it doesn't mean it's not good.
Yeah. And I don't know why they wouldn't. It does become very predictable. It is a very much, why are you going alone by yourself? Because you're not going to come back. It's very well cast and very well done. I do think it has problems, and if we ever did it on the show, I would, of course, talk about them. But I thought
maybe it had to do with it being a period piece.
And I think the title, unless people know, there's no real reference. The Voyage of the Demeter has nothing to say about Dracula, vampires, anything else. So maybe
Right.
it's
They should
that
have called
too.
it Dracula's Voyage or something. Yeah.
Right, right. Dracula goes to London or something.
And I agree with you. There should have been a little bit of at least what he is more like as a human and not just bestial.
Correct. I would love to have seen, even if they did it as the coda, showing him as
A gentleman.
a gentleman or
Yeah.
something. Might have been interesting.
Yeah.
But he's still a beast. But anyway, so that's what I did. I got to enjoy a good little, nice little horror movie.
Wow. Well, what did I do in my genre week? Well, I saw Monsters too. I got
Yes.
around to watching a modern release as well. I watched A Quiet Place, day one.
Oh, okay. You've been
Um,
wanting to see that.
yeah, you know I love apocalyptic movies, and
Hmm.
this one does not disappoint. It's an alien invasion apocalypse, of course, so it's a little bit faster paced than my average zombie apocalypse movie that I like. But I hinted when I talked about this in Coming to Get You that it looked a lot like the Spielberg version of War of the Worlds as far as some
Yep.
of the adventure or the action sequences. It is much better than that movie. Just to let
Good.
you know, even though it's set in New York City, it's still about it's still a small story, one of those that I like about two people that find each other amidst all the chaos. It was directed by a guy named Michael Sarnowski. I don't know anything about him except he did a movie called Pig with Nicolas Cage that gets some pretty fair reviews. I want to see more of him though, and he has a Robin Hood movie coming out.
Hmm.
So I'm
Okay.
curious about that because there hasn't been one of those in a while. The cast is great. Stars Lupita Nyong'o, who I love, and Joseph Quinn, who most of you folks out there would recognize as Eddie from Stranger Things.
Oh, Eddie. Eddie's so good. Eddie's the best.
Jimon Hunsu has a supporting role as well, if I am pronouncing that right. I never know how to pronounce his name. Synopsis: when New York City comes under attack from an alien invasion, a woman and survivors try to find a way to safety. They soon learn that they must remain absolutely silent as the mysterious creatures are drawn to the slightest sound. Well, that's no big secret. It's already happened twice before in two other
Right.
movies. This is just the beginning, like when they land. It scores, it scores 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is kind of logically. I prefer movies in their order of release usually. The first one got 96, the second one got 91, this one got 86. I would bump this one up to the 90s as well because it is not a bad movie at all. It's just we're deep into the story now, so there is going to be a little bit of repetition.
But it's the prequel, so it's really the beginning of the story.
Yes, that's so funny because I do this with novels too. I just did this with two romance novels. I wrote a prequel to, so the prequel is actually the second book in the series,
What's
and this
interesting,
is the third
one of the
in the series.
podcasts I listened to, they just did uh The Empire Strikes Back, and they did it from the perspective of, okay, we have to talk about this movie as though we're just watching Empire Strikes Back and not knowing all of the Star Wars lore that's happened since then. And it was very interesting to see all of them go back and forth about, okay, well, yes, this is one of the biggest reveals in movie history with Luke, I am your father, right? But we also keep seeing Anakin in that freaking costume, and we hate Anakin from the prequels. And so, like
Yeah,
you said, getting deep into the story is odd because they're really not at that time. Now we are, if we go back. But
I know, and I
so,
don't want to go off on a tangent, but I've told you how much I love nonlinear storytelling, and if you look at
yeah,
the entire arc, that's exactly what you're seeing in some places, anyway. Yeah.
okay, yeah,
Yeah. So that's what I
interesting.
did in my genre week. I watched monsters basically come down and decimate Earth.
Hmm. Well, this week we are going to talk about some monsters in a way, definitely some other kind of monsters, and definitely some decimation going on. And it's interesting that I just subliminally right there said Empire Strikes Back, because that's an incredible key for this movie.
It sure is.
And I didn't even have it on my list. But anyway, for those of you who don't know what we're doing, why are you even listening right now? But we're glad you are. But
We're gonna spoil it.
It's going to spoil the 23-year-old movie. We are going back to 2002 to The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the second in Peter Jackson's filmic trilogy of J.R.R. Tolkien's incredible novel trilogy that essentially created, I think, for the past probably 3 generations, our version of myth and what is mythic and epic battles of good and evil, and Joseph Campbell and all of those things thrown in. For those of you who have not seen it, go watch it now and come back, because we'll have spoilers all over it. But as a reminder to those of you who have seen it, this is straight from IMDb. Basically, the synopsis is the continuing quest of Frodo and the Fellowship to destroy the One Ring. Frodo and Sam discover they are being followed by the mysterious Gollum. Aragorn, the elf Legolas, and Gimli, the dwarf, encounter the besieged Rohan kingdom, whose once great King Theoden has fallen under Saruman's deadly spell. And it's amazing I say all those names like they're just every day, because Tolkien literally made them all up.
I know. And I was,
languages.
the whole time I was rereading my notes for this, I was like, he's going to have to remember these names because I don't have a clue.
Well, it's a huge cast. It was a
is.
huge undertaking to begin with. This is the second in our series because we, of course, covered Fellowship of the Ring first, which was the first novel. We did that, last season?
It was this time last season, the very first film we do coming back after Christmas break. Yeah, January.
And it was a break for us because it doesn't fall totally into a horror or science fiction genre. It's a fantasy film. Mm-hmm. But we decided this, our 5th and 6th season, or 6th and 7th season, we're going to expand into maybe some fantasy and some mystery. So that'll be suspense. That'll be fun. Do you remember the first time you saw this movie?
I do. I'm pretty sure I saw this one in a theater because I don't think I saw the first one in a theater.
Okay.
And I think I saw the latter two in a theater. So this might be the third time I saw it because I may have watched it once on DVD. Between.
I have seen it several times. Did you like it the first time you saw it?
I did. But I had forgotten it upon this viewing. And I went into it thinking we were just talking about trilogies, how usually the second installment is the weakest. Whereas I think this installment may be the strongest.
One of them, yeah, I agree. Again, I think Empire is probably the best sequel. Well, Godfather 2 is the best sequel ever made, but I think to the original.
Well, I was actually going to the source material, and I wanted to ask you, since you've read the books, I didn't realize that Lord of the Rings was a trilogy of books. I thought it might be one that they just broke up into 3 movies.
No, it's a trilogy.
Because they always talk about Peter Jackson saying, I needed it to begin strong, end strong, like, like a single movie. So I was like, well, then what is he doing different from the book?
The major difference, and I've got it in my notes, but the major difference between this one and the novel is it goes to the Helm's Deep battle, but then everything that happens in the next movie, in Return of the King, is how the novel of The Two Towers ends. The whole thing with Shelob the spider and Frodo being abducted and all the stuff with Gollum turning bad, that all happens at the end of Two Towers. And we're left with everybody decimated at the end of it. And so Jackson
they just
felt
ended
that
it with the battle in this one.
He felt that the victory of the battle would be a better ending, and then just hint, and that's why he added the little coda scene with Gollum going, "She will do it. Yes, she will hurt the master." And we don't know who she is, what he's referring to, Bob, but that's how we end, and then we start the next movie there. And I think it was pretty smart. When I first saw, the first time I saw this, I think I shared last time, we made this a family event. So we always traveled to Atlanta to see my sister-in-law and her family and have our families all together for Christmas for like at this time. And we all went the first Christmas and went and saw Fellowship of the Rings. And then the next Christmas we went and saw The Two Towers.
Yeah, because
And
they were
so,
released on Christmas Day, weren't they?
oh, they were released around Christmas time every year.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we also went and saw The Return of the King the next year. But I remember we were leaving the theater after this one. And me, of course, was going on my epistle about, I love J.R. Tolkien. I love the characters. I love the mythology he set up and everything else. But basically, all three of these books and all three of these movies are the same freaking story told three different times.
Yeah.
We always have the little desperate quest going on, and then we end with a big, huge, epic battle, and either good or evil wins at the end. And there's always hope. And that's the way the novels are, that's the way the movies are. And my sister-in-law goes, yeah, you may have to explain that to me because I don't know what's going on. And I go, what? And she goes, I never read the books and I never saw any other versions, and I really don't know what's going on. I said, you never read the books or know any? And she goes, no. So she was really struggling to follow the through line because of so many characters and so much stuff. To Peter Jackson's, I think, benefit and what he did in editing for this, there's not a lot of history of things. We meet the Ents in this. Who are the Ents? Where'd they come from? How? We don't ever find out. He never tells us. Well, yeah, essentially, this is a pre-Groot.
Honestly, they're my least favorite thing in this movie, but I don't think it has to do with them. I think it has to do with those two characters, those other two hobbits. They're my least favorite characters.
Pippin and yeah. But so that was the first time I saw it. I was actually in the theater, big, epic, gorgeous, everything else. Since then, I've gotten the DVD. I've gotten the extended version DVD, which is almost an hour and a half longer. It's almost 5 hours long. It's crazy. And seen various iterations and, of course, web background videos and all the stuff of making it and all that. Because it's always been, my daughter, Autumn, loves Lord of the Rings. And so does my newest daughter-in-law, Ashley. So they both commiserate on Gollum and Sam and everything all the time.
This is their Wizard of Oz. It is, really, when you think about it. We grew up with Wizard of Oz coming on television every Easter or whenever it was it aired, and that was our big fantasy movie. So they've just got a larger fantasy movie that came out more recently.
That's pretty true. That's pretty true. Did you like it when you saw it? Did you like it this time?
I do. I think they could call it Injury Central from what I read, because it seemed like every actor got hurt while making this. I would be a little bit leery to do a Peter Jackson film for people getting hurt.
I think Christopher Lee actually mentioned it, or somebody once, about the longer you are on set, the longer you are filming something, the more opportunity for accidents or problems or injuries or whatever. If you're only shooting for 10 days, there's a difference than shooting for 10 months or something. And remember,
but he's not young Dracula running around up staircases and stuff anymore.
True. But remember, the whole thing about the production of this particular movie was it was in the middle of this production run, and because Peter Jackson filmed them all three back to back and then cut them together. So they were in New Zealand for over 2 years shooting all three of these movies. The Helm's Deep battle sequence in this, so from the minute they walk up and they look and you see the valley and then Helm's Deep in the background, the little gorgeous matte painting and everything else, and you hear the voiceover of it's protected Rohan for generations and da-da-da. From that moment to the end of the battle, they shot for 4 months. Just the Battle of Helm's Deep was 4 months of shooting. He had 20 hours of material to edit down to just the 40 minutes or whatever of the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Yeah, and a lot of it was CGI too. Like some of the horses and things were CGI'd in as well.
Well, a lot of stuff was augmented. Yeah.
Right.
But but he basically shot a lot of everything. They cast 6-foot-tall actors to be Uruk-hai, and they had to find all these elves and blah, blah, blah. And then they would replicate them in CGI. So they only had 12 of them, but now there's 47 or whatever.
Yeah. Or if like a horse comes into the foreground in front of main characters, that was sometimes like a CGI as well.
Right.
They would like, or show somebody turning on a horse. They would film it, but then put it in there. I'm maybe using the wrong words. I read this somewhere, though. I know I did. Before we get into the details, though, of that battle, which are obviously central to this story, we may want to touch just a little bit to remind folks about the background, because it's all the same people. I mean, there's a few additions to cast, but it is, again, directed by Peter Jackson, who we know much more now because of these movies. He started with things like Dead Alive and The Frighteners. It was written by him, and I believe 2 women, Philippa Boyens and Fran Walsh, who
Fran
are
Walsh is his partner.
Yeah, that's his spouse and or partner, and they are frequent collaborators of his. And then again, Howard Shore did the music as he did in the first film. And we know about that because of his frequent collaborations with David Cronenberg. For some reason, that's how the connection there.
And I think Shore also did the music for Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that was Shore.
Yeah, I think so too. Which we talked about with Magic, didn't we? Except that was Jerry Goldsmith.
That was Goldsmith in Magic.
Yeah. But did you have something else you wanted to say before we go to like scenes or?
No, just I think those were the major production people on it. I only wanted to say, you mentioned CGI, and so just quickly, I think the CGI in this still holds up after 23 years. I think it says a lot about the painstaking detail they took to make it work. From Gollum being a character that is alive and breathing and we care about him and everything else, all the way up through multiple horses and lances and arrows and everything else.
Right. And when we get to casting, we'll talk about Gollum, because I think this is the first thing I ever heard of Andy Serkis being, this is what put him on the map for me that I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Scenes?
Anything with Gandalf. I said that the first time. I'll say it again. When Gandalf returns, love it.
He has 2 great reveals in this.
One of my favorites, and this is not even really a scene, it's an exit, and it's when he takes off on that horse, man. It looks so cool seeing a guy that looks that old just hauling ass on that horse, like he knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
Love that.
Shadowfax, I think, is the name of the horse. And he calls him like the Lord of all horses or something like that.
Yeah,
but
he's beautiful. At one point, I thought it was a unicorn. I thought, did I just see a horn? But it's not. It's just a white horse.
For me, I guess, interestingly, when I was first writing my scenes down, the one that I like is the Ent battle. It's not that I like particularly Greybeard or the Ents, because they do have to talk so slow it gets really boring and repetitious. But when they say this is the last march of the Ents, and then they attack the tower, Saruman's tower, it's really, and I really like the way they did that. Yeah. Again, that's all CGI, and it looks pretty impressive.
It does. And I think they are very cool. Like I said, I think the reason that's my least favorite storyline in this one is because I'm just not a big fan of Pippin and the other Hobbit.
Okay. Yeah. Merry and Pippin are the 2.
Right. It almost feels like, oh, we have to give them a story now. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And for all I know, Tolkien felt the same way. He probably said, you know what, I've got to do something with these guys because they were central in the first.
Well, he needed to have a dual battle happening at the same time, because he needed Isengard to be destroyed, but that couldn't be Frodo and Sam because they're on their way to Mount Doom. And that couldn't be our trio of warriors because they're actually in Rohan now. So he could have had them turn back and attack Isengard, but then it would have been just like the feel of Fellowship of the Ring. So I think what was cool about it was he created 3 different separate storylines happening, and that's been replicated. Talk about keys. That's been replicated for decades now in mythic storytelling. I'm going to take my characters and I'm going to split them into 3 parties. I think even, doesn't that even happen at near the end of Salem's Lot? He's got the people that are going to the Marster's house, and then he's got somebody else somewhere prisoner and somewhere else. Or maybe I'm thinking of 30 Days. Anyway, that whole triple story thing happening. Storylines, I guess.
In the
Does that make sense?
book, yeah, it does. I was thinking in Salem's Lot. In the book, I think it does happen in separate places. In the movie, it doesn't. There's
Yeah.
definitely something going on at the inn where Ben is staying, too,
Right.
in that basement, as well as the basement of the Marston house. But
Yeah.
back to this story and scenes. Another one that just immediately came to mind is part of that coda you just mentioned, when Frodo gets entranced and almost captured by Nazgul, and Sam has to rescue him.
Yes.
That's a good scene.
It's a great scene, and it's really good with the two of them. We talked about it a little bit in Fellowship, and it gets a lot more in the next one. But the bromance between Frodo and Sam sometimes can be maudlin and be too much, but that scene works really well and shows their real affection for each other, and they're willing to die for each other. One of my favorites is Gollum. The particular Gollum duality scene, I think, was a brilliant choice to personify Gollum or Sméagol, which is his real name, and show that he's got a dark side and a light side, and he's battling that. I thought that was a great scene.
Mm-hmm. I was going to
And
say
the way
any
Jackson-
scene with Gollum or Gandalf.
Well, yeah.
The 2 G's in this movie are the scenes you want to
the
see.
2 G's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of the 2 towers, it's the 2 G's. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the way he stages that and the way Circus plays it with doing the 2 sides. Yes, he will. No, he won't. Yes, he will.
We didn't mention it, and that's probably because it would be casting, but that was not how Jackson intended to film it. It was going to be pure animation with voiceover, and he decided to use Andy in a motion capture suit because he was such a physical actor.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, that's how he got pigeonholed into similar roles going forward, including the Planet of the Apes movies.
Well, remember we talked about him with King Kong, with Jackson's King Kong, because she mentioned that what made the movie work for her was she was able to look up into Andy Serkis's eyes.
Right.
Even though he had dots all over his face, but she said she could look into his eyes and see Kong and see the emotion and everything. And he's very expressive. He's really, and he's a director now. He's directing things.
Yeah.
So that's
and he's also, think of how many, we talked about, who's the Marvel actress that's in it's Zoe
Saldana.
She's in Star Wars. She's in Marvel. She's in Star Trek. Well, Andy Serkis is the same way. Avatar, yes. And Andy Serkis is in Marvel now. He's in the Lord of the Rings movies. He's in King Kong. He's in all kinds of stuff that are huge franchises. So he's like the male equivalent of Zoya Saldana.
And then I think as far as just, for me, the Battle of Helm's Deep is not as emotionally dramatic as when we get into the Return of the King's battles. Just because
they're retreating
we saw
a lot.
Well, there's I don't know, it just always struck me as I'm not really concerned as much because I know there's a third movie and I know there's a third book.
You said the story is always the same.
And we're going to have another battle. Yeah. We're going to go to Minas Tirith in next movie and go battle there too. And we're all going to be fraught and we're all going to start to lose and we're going to have to come back at the end and rally. Right. But anyway, and we're always rescued. We're always rescued by something else. In this one, he's rescued by the riders of
with Rohan. Gandalf, which is a great scene. Another great scene when Gandalf shows up with the troops. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the third one, you'll see all the ghosts that attack. So it's really interesting. But I do think that as far as showing medieval warfare and what it must have been like and how difficult it was, and the arrogance of structures and things, this was a really cool battle sequence.
Oh,
The
yeah.
way the Uruk-hai attacked and being able to throw catapults up and lock on and then twist ropes to get ladders to come up onto the deck, and all the archers way back behind the wall shooting over the wall so it comes down onto it was really a cool battle.
Explosives and
First use
out
of explosives.
walls. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some pretty major stuff. That's probably one of the reasons why the movie's so successful, is because it is one enormous action sequence.
Yeah. Well, from the very beginning, they're in peril because Sam and Mary have been captured by a group of orcs. And so they are running. I mean, Mary and Pippin. Sam and Frodo are still on their way to Doom, and they
Encounter Gollum.
run into Gollum.
Yeah.
And then is Gollum good, bad? Is he leading them to good, bad? We don't know. And then Theoden has been taken over by Wormtongue and Saruman and is, evil. And they have to transition him.
I really wish they could have used Brad Dourif more.
I'm
is
sure you do.
Great.
I'm sure you do.
He is the best addition to this series, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, he is.
Well, Gollum too. Gollum is too.
He's Brad Dourif. He plays that character well. From X-Files on, baby. He's always good at that character.
And you can tell that when he worked with Jack Nicholson, he just absorbed Jack Nicholson's talent into his body. Because when you listen to him in other films, like I watched him not long ago in Wise Blood, which is a John Huston movie based on a Flannery O'Connor novel, he just resonates Jack Nicholson now. When I see him, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, he picked up everything Jack Nicholson knew. And Nicholson picked it up from Roger Corman movies.
Who's the one that Wynn doesn't like? James, the actor that Wynn just despises.
The one from Enemy Mine?
Yeah.
I can't think of his name, but I can see his face.
Anyway, that character, he's been in all these iconic movies, and he's bad in them, and I don't like him. Brad Dourif has been in all these different movies and genres, and he's great in them.
He was in X-Files too, first season.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Babylon 5. He plays a serial murderer in Babylon 5 who has his memory erased, and becomes a priest.
Yeah.
And then slowly it starts coming back.
Yeah, he picks great roles because Hazel Motes is a very strange character from Flannery O'Connor. And to think, he probably just did it because he knew he'd be working with John Huston. But it's still a great character. The guy you're thinking of is Brian James.
Brian James, that's it.
And he is terrible.
He's terrible. He's just not a good. He plays a thuggy, and he's just not good.
Big eyes, big 80s off kilter.
Yeah. And Brad does play these tortured souls, but he plays them so well.
Oh, Dune, he's a great villain. Yeah.
He's a villain in Dune. So
he's Chucky.
Yeah.
Basically, he is the Andy Serkis of Chucky.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, anyway, we keep
cast?
segueing into cast. I guess we should, or did you want to mention any other scenes real quick? Any elf scenes? Maybe when the elves turn up to help, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I always equate that is the Battle of Helm's Deep. It has its beat moments all the way through it, but the whole thing from the elf arrival, from the trio's arrival, and them thinking we're glad to have you here with us, blah blah blah, to that's a lot of orcs. We don't have a prayer. The elves arriving and saying that we used to have an alliance with men, and now it's back again. We'll fight one last time. That's good. The battle itself, the nuances of the battle, from Gimli not being able to see over the parapet, and he keeps going, "What's going on? To later on with the whole thing about they're trying to protect the main gate, and he says, "Throw me, but don't tell the elf." All the way through to Aragorn going to Theoden and saying, "Ride out with me one last time. Let's show them what men can do." And you go, "Yeah, now I'm invested." Although that sequence makes no freaking sense. There's There are 4 deep orcs all the way down that bridge, and they're on horseback, and they plow all the way through them, all the way down to the field. There's
Right.
no freaking way. They
Right.
would be killed in 10 feet.
Yeah. I think the reason I brought up the elf scene, though, is because I prefer the elves there to battle than any of the stuff with Liv Tyler. I forgot her character's name. And
Erwin.
Erwin, and she's like, that's the whole interview with the vampire scene where you can't be with him because you will see him wither away and die, and
Oh,
you will
yeah.
still be young and all that. And I'm like,
Very good.
yeah. Oh, you know what? You're right. That's a key. We were talking about how we didn't have any keys, and we're finding keys. But it is. It's the whole immortal thing. Can an immortal love a man? A mortal.
Yeah, they needed the scene. They needed a breather from all the stuff that was going on, but they also needed that scene because it does lead into the next movie and
Right.
what happens in the next movie.
Well,
So,
because he's
yeah,
also flirting with that other girl in this movie, too.
yeah, a lot of people took umbrage with that. The fact that they introduced Theoden's, I think it's his daughter-in-law, if I remember correctly.
It's the king's daughter, isn't it? Or daughter-in-law.
Yeah, Theoden. Theoden
Yes,
is
because didn't her husband get killed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which was his son.
Right.
And Wormtongue probably had something to do with that, and she knows it, and that's why she's upset with him. I think her name, let me look up her name, Morwen. Morwen is her name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she has a bigger role in the next movie.
Okay. Well, let's go to roles since we're there. I have a good bit, but I'm not repeating all the stuff I said last season. So, folks, if you want to know more about these people, you can always listen to our Fellowship of the Ring podcast from last season. The main casting, we have Elijah Wood. He's back as Frodo. We have Ian McKellen. He's back as Gandalf. Viggo Mortensen is back as Aragorn. And Sean Astin is back as Samwise Gamgee. I do have a note that one of the reasons Sean took this part was at the advice of his stepfather, John Astin, who had previously worked with Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh on The Frighteners.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. I always think when people wanted to be in this, it was because they're fans of the books. But this was actually a suggestion from John Astin to his stepson, Sean. He was very enthused with the rapport and their understanding of the film and the crew. And John said, when you've got people basically that dedicated, you want to work with them. And that's how Sean Astin, part of why Sean Astin ended up in this movie. One of the biggest casting things, of course, is Andy Serkis as Gollum. He is a wretched hobbit-like creature, as you mentioned, known as Sméagol. Is that how you say it?
Sméagol.
Sméagol. He owned the ring for 500 years, but now guides Frodo to his quest. Andy said he based Gollum's desperation and craving on the withdrawal of heroin addicts.
Makes sense. I could see that.
Is why he's always saying precious. I think I read that he says that like 20 times or something. Billy Boyd played Peregrine Took. He is the extremely foolish hobbit who is a distant cousin of Frodo. Dominic Monaghan and Meriadoc Brandybuck, or was Meriadoc Brandybuck. He's one of the hobbits I'm not crazy about.
John Reese. Nobody really is. Pippin and Merry are just like, yeah.
They're the Robin to Batman, basically.
Yeah.
If there were 2 people being Batman and 2 people being Robin. John Rhys Davis played Gimli. He is the dwarf warrior you mentioned that couldn't see over the wall. Did you know he also voices Treebeard?
Yes.
Yeah, he does. Orlando Bloom returns as Legolas. He is one of the elven archers. He's really good with a bow and arrow.
Very.
Bernard Hill is Theoden. He is another newer character. He's the king of Rohan, who is under Sauron's spell when we first arrive. And then, of course, Gandalf heals him so that he can help to be a part of this battle at the end. He was originally considered for the role of Gandalf, and I probably mentioned that the first time around. That's what I'm thinking. Christopher Lee returns as Saruman the White. Is it Saruman the White? Seems like it would be the Black.
No, he's white. He's always been the white. That's why
Okay.
Gandalf becomes the white, because Gandalf was the gray until he's reborn as the white, meaning he's more powerful.
Oh, okay. Well, he is a wizard waging war upon Rohan and devastating the Fangorn forest. So and he aligns himself as Sauron, which sounds a lot like Saruman.
Yeah, there's that, like Arwan and Erwin and
It's very
Moron.
confusing.
And yeah.
That's why I'm glad I have notes. For some reason, I have a note in here that this is the only trilogy to have all the movies nominated in the top 100 greatest movies of all time by the American Film Institute, but that's not a
Wow.
casting note. That is an award note that somehow got pasted in here. Hugo Weaving returns as Elrond. He is one of my favorite actors in this movie, and he has very little to do with this movie. He's only in like one scene, expressing his love, his doubt over his daughter's love for Aragorn, and I think that may be Liv Tyler's only scene too.
In this movie, yes.
Yes, Miranda Otto as Eowyn is another new addition. You mentioned her. She is Theoden's niece who falls in love with Aragorn. Uma Thurman was offered that role, but turned it down and later regretted it. I should add. On Miranda Otto's first day of shooting, Liv Tyler was said to have welcomed her with enthusiastic open arms, saying, "I am so glad there is another woman on this film." Because there's a lot of guys. Kate Winslet was also offered that role. So Kate Winslet and Uma Thurman turned down that role before Liv Tyler. Before, what's her name? I just said it. Miranda Otto, excuse me. Brad Dourif, another one of my favorite adds to this movie, plays Grima Wormtongue, an agent of Saruman at Edoras who renders Theoden incapable of decisions and desires Fowen. So he desires Fowen? I didn't get that.
Oh, yeah. He wants her. Yeah.
Okay. That must be more in the book.
Yes. Well, there's a little bit rated here because he kind of lecherously is talking to her and she says, "Get away from me," because she's in mourning for her own husband and everything else. So, yeah.
Between takes, this is Brad Dourif. We were talking about Jack Nicholson, and Brad's clearly a character actor. I don't know that Jack Nicholson is. Brad stayed in character by continuing to speak with an English accent until all his footage had been completed. This was so convincing that at the end, when he spoke in his normal voice again, Bernard Hill thought that his English accent was real and that his American accent was fake.
That's cool.
That is great. Brad had to shave his eyebrows off to play this sinister role because he was recalled several times during the trilogy's filming. He ended up doing that 5 times, shaving off his eyebrows. Do you know who turned down the role? Who would have been pretty damn good?
It's Wormtongue? Who?
Richard O'Brien.
Ooh. That would
Yeah.
have been interesting.
For those of you out there that don't know, Richard O'Brien was Riff Raff in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and he can do sinister quite well.
Oh, yeah. Snaky sinister, too, because that's what Wormtongue is. He literally is this.
It's like a serpent.
He's Iago. He's this. He's
Iago, but he's more like Richard III. Because he looks more deformed than Iago looks.
Yeah, he's bent.
Does that make sense?
And yeah.
Iago's just short. He's not ugly.
Well, but I meant that whole whispering in the king's ear the entire time.
Oh, yeah. I see that.
That.
Carl Urban is Fomer in this, Theoden's nephew and previous chief marshal of the Rittermark, and that's McCoy himself, am I not?
Yes,
mistaken?
same actor who plays McCoy. And also in Bad Boys.
The
He's
Boys.
The Boys. Yeah, The Boys.
The Boys.
And Boromir is the brother of Boromir. Boromir was the one we didn't like in Fellowship of the Ring.
And he got
was
killed.
also who got killed by the Uruk-hai, yes.
Right.
And was trying to steal the ring from Frodo. And
Oh my
the same
God.
thing Boromir
Just
was doing.
a message to folks listening out there. If you have not watched this movie, I understand your confusion.
Yeah, well, and again, he makes all of these names sound similar and all this stuff, and then and again, love the mythos that he created, but I do think there's a lot of repetition in the storytelling. In the first one, Frodo gets separated. He's taken by Boromir, and Boromir is going to take the ring from him because he thinks it'll bring power to Rohan, and that's what he wants to do. But instead, he gets killed. And in this one, Faramir takes Frodo, and he wants to take the ring because he'll bring power to Gondor. It's Gondor is the country that they are both from.
Oh, I don't know any of the countries.
Yeah. So,
and then he also brings relatives in, like nieces and brothers and things like that. Yeah, it's very confusing.
Middle Earth is a busy place. It's a big place. So.
And just to quickly round out the cast, Liv Tyler returns as Arwen, Kate Blanchett as Galadriel, Sean Bean as Boromir, and that's probably a flashback. Yep. Craig Parker as Haldir, Jean Lee as Hama, Bruce Hopkins as Gamling, Theoden's chief lieutenant, John Bach as Madril, Faramir's closest aide, Nathaniel Lees as Ugluk. Is that how you say that? Ugluk?
Yeah, one of the orc. Yeah.
Yes, he is the leader of the band of Uruk-hai who kidnapped Merry and Pippin. All right, I'm going to jump on out of cast because there's just so much. Awards, though, there's a lot of those too. This movie was nominated for 6 Oscars: Best Picture, Art Direction, Editing, Sound Editing, Visual Effects. But it won, obviously, for Sound Editing and Visual Effects.
Mm-hmm.
The Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror gave it 10 nominations for Fantasy Film, Actor Viggo Mortensen, Supporting Actor Andy Serkis, Young Actor Elijah Wood, Directing, Writing, Music, Costume, Makeup, Special Effects. It won 4 of those 10. It won Best Fantasy Film, Supporting Actor for Andy Serkis, Costumes and Makeup. And then I just wrote, and a slew of other wins in just about every competition you can imagine. It is on the 1001 movies you must see before you die list, as are all 3 of these films. So,
makes sense. It is epic movie making and storytelling. Yep,
it is. Did you have other things you want to touch on before we try to attempt some keys?
Well, I do think that it does suffer a little bit from Peter Jackson suffers a little bit from the George Lucas thing of, after my movie's made, I want to keep changing it and adding to it. So there are several iterations of this movie. I'm not sure. There's the golden edition, the extended edition, the director's cut. I
think that's crazy. And I have something I wanted to mention that I forgot. I looked Brad Dourif up to see if he returns in the 3rd movie because he's so good in this, and saw that he's only in the extended cut of the 3rd movie.
Correct. Because he ties up all the loose ends in the extended cuts. If you watch the extended cut of each movie, there's all these other storylines that are going on that he went ahead and filmed, but trimmed them to keep the progress going and to keep it under 3 hours usually. But there's all sorts of stories going on. Like what happens to Wormtongue after he gets thrown out of the castle? And you find
that out in the 3rd extended cut or in the 2nd extended cut?
In the extended cut of the 3rd movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I did not watch the extended cut of this movie, but I will contemplate watching the 3rd one next year. Maybe.
Just to see.
I read that if you watch the extended cuts of all 3 of these movies, you're watching 12 to 14 hours of film. That's a long friggin' movie.
Yeah. Well, 3 movies. A long friggin' story.
It's like watching a season of something.
Yeah.
On television.
Oh, yeah. Easily. Only other things I've got before we do keys are just some notes and stuff. I love the practicality of this movie. I love the fact that the armor looks real. It feels visceral. It works. All the makeup works in this. Even Theoden's aged, possessed, evil, darkened makeup works so well when he does the change. So I think
he's pale, isn't he?
Yeah, he's very pale, and his eyes are clouded like cataracts, and he looks so old. And then when it changes, suddenly he looks like he's in probably his late 40s, early 50s.
Right.
More brown hair and long and all that. Love Gandalf the White, the birth of what I call the birth of Gandalf the White, which is him appearing to them in the woods kind of thing. That was great. I do think that This movie suffers, and the next one will suffer too, in the fact that yet again, we never see a magician do magic. And it bothers me.
So it's like
And
having Merlin in your movie without using him.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I can't remember from the books. I want to go back and look at it again and say, did he do it in the books? And that's why, or whatever, because he leads people into battle and stuff like that, but he doesn't do anything.
He dies and is resurrected, but that's the major feat, I guess.
Well, and in the first one, he says, none shall pass, and does the staff down and breaks the bridge. And we all go, oh, that's cool. But that's really the only magic that freaking Gandalf does in all three movies. So
that's
strange. Just a pet peeve of mine.
Does he do stuff in the books?
That's what I'm trying. I cannot remember. So evidently, maybe not. And I just never registered it before. He was just Gandalf the White. He's powerful. He's a great wizard. I'm not sure what he's doing. He fights with Saruman. Remember, they had their big fight where they're throwing each other all around the room.
Yeah, that's cool in the first movie because they're throwing each other around without touching each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're using the Force or whatever, but but you'll see it in this. You saw it in this movie, and you'll see it in the Battle of Minas Tirith. He doesn't really do any magic. He doesn't have fireballs or blast beams or whatever. All we've come to expect a wizard to be able to do. So that's just a little nitpick, but it's fine. He's Gandalf, so he's cool. I like it.
I'm typing some keys that are coming to mind. Yeah. I do have one bit of trivia, though, and it's very tiny before we move on to keys, and that is body count. The body count is officially 468.
I wonder who sat and counted all of that.
I don't, and that must just be on-screen deaths because God knows more than that died in that battle.
I'm sure. Yeah, but does that include like the ints? Like the one int that's burned and the other one.
I'm sure.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. I'm assuming that's on-screen deaths.
How did you feel that Saruman didn't have a death scene? Saruman.
Did he die?
We don't know.
I don't think he died.
In this version, we just see him
captured, isn't he, in the castle?
We just see him on the balcony, and they're approaching Isengard, the tower.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for a death scene because I figured he was still alive.
I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that they actually did film his death scene, and Christopher Lee was upset that Peter Jackson edited it out.
Well, he's a very staunch supporter of the novels.
Yes.
So he would have been if it's in the novel.
So I think that's, because he's killed at the Battle of Isengard. There is no more Saruman. And I don't think we see him in the next movie.
Okay. Well, that's where I confuse those two names, Saruman and Sauron or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, because Sauron is the evil. Sauron. He's the big guy.
The big eye floating in the space or
correct.
Whatever. Yeah.
Isengard is the other tower, hence the Twin Towers, and that is controlled by Saruman, who was the mentor of Gandalf.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, I didn't. It's been so long since I've seen these movies that I didn't remember him not being in the third movie. So,
yeah. So, trivia, you have any other trivia or stuff? You said a lot of people got hurt.
Well, yeah, a lot of people got hurt, but I didn't put down specific examples. I know that Christopher Lee either got hurt in this film or the first film. He may have broke a couple of fingers.
I think that was in the first scene, and that was in that battle with Gandalf.
Right. And then Viggo got hurt all the time. He was breaking bones left and right, and he would keep filming.
Yeah, his big one in this one that everybody talks about in trivia stuff is when they come upon the orcs, or what's left of the orcs after the Rohan riders killed them all, and they can't find Merry and Pippin, and they think they're dead. He kicks a helmet.
Yes.
And in that scene, when he kicked the helmet, he broke his toe.
Right.
And so the scream, he says, of frustration was actually pain, but cameras kept rolling and he kept doing the scene.
Right.
So, but that's one of the ones they talk about. But yeah, and I also noticed, I have it in my notes like 3 different times. I said, does Aragorn ever wash his hands? because every time you see his hands, he's holding somebody's hand, or he's touching their face, or he's pulling a sword, or he's doing. They are bloody and dirty. And good. Does he ever wash his hands? I don't
Nope.
understand.
He's in character. He had other ones too, and I can't remember what they are. I want to say he broke ribs, or somebody broke ribs, and
I'm
I want to
sure.
say they kept working until
Yeah.
later on it was apparent, and they forced him to get medical help or something.
Right.
I can't remember. Like I said, I didn't put all this information in because it is a lot of trivia, and there's a lot of trivia for this movie because
Oh yeah,
obviously
you can find hours and hours.
Yeah, it takes a
Yeah,
while.
these
to
are
get through.
epic, huge movies. I think recently anything from 20 on that is as epic as these movies. Think of something else that's this huge. Even Marvel. I mean, Endgame, maybe, but it's not as big as this for the entire film. Like
I
this
would
one
say
is.
those last two Avengers movies, maybe, but James Cameron wants Avatar to be that.
Sure he does. Yeah. But I haven't seen Drowning in Water, so I don't know if his,
I haven't seen it either. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, I should probably watch that.
Yeah, no, I never think that. So you'll have to tie me down to make me watch that movie. I really did not like the first one. So
Yeah,
but Keys. What you got keys wise? We
Keys,
said a bunch.
well, the
that are
ones
pretty
that we've
good.
already mentioned are Empire Strikes Back because it is the middle film of an epic trilogy, so to speak.
And ends kind of on a question. We don't know what's happening to our characters. We don't know
Mhm.
what's going to happen. Gollum is saying something bad is going to happen to Frodo. And we don't know, is Aragorn going to give up on Arwen and start dating this new chick? And we don't really know what happened to Saruman. So we're left in a
He's
cliffhanger
Frodo's
kind
father.
of feel. Yeah, yeah, of course. There's other similarities too. The basic story in Empire is a triple storyline, which Lucas tended to do in all the movies. Usually set big arcs set in 3 different locations. So Empire starts at Hoth, and then goes to Dagobah with Luke's training, and then goes to Bespin with the Cloud City. So
Yeah.
you've got 3 storylines going on at the same time. So you've got all of these little adventures. Luke's over here, Han and Leia are over here, Darth is over here.
Right.
And that's what's happening in this too. So there's a lot of Star Wars. There's a lot of things that Star Wars was inspired
Well, I was
by.
going to put
in
Star
this movie.
Wars when you started talking about the Force, but then I thought, you know what? Empire's the perfect example as far as
Right.
key.
And using the Force too. Yes, they use the
Right.
Force.
And I could use other vampire things, but I'm still going to use Interview with a Vampire as a model for what I was talking about with that conversation between the elf and leader and his daughter.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Because she is immortal. And I don't think, like a vampire, I don't think she can make Aragorn immortal, can she?
No, he's an elf. He's a human.
Well,
They'll
they may
die.
have magic potions. They've got pointed ears,
Oh.
whatever. I don't know.
The elves are much more zen than they are in Tolkien world. Than they
I
are.
do have a question about that I wanted to ask you that I thought about in the shower this morning. Is when you read this,
Mhm.
did you picture these characters this way? Or did you think of the elves being very short?
Great question. No, they're definitely mentioned as very tall.
Okay.
That's the big difference between them and the dwarves. The dwarves are very short. So yeah, I picture the archetypes looking very similar to this. I think he has captured these characters very well. And the fact that when we get to Rohan, all of these people have long hair. They're hairy, burly men that are horsemen, but they're all beautiful, hairy men.
It's like they're trying to encapsulate the different characters. You've got the elves, you've got the men, you've got the orcs, and the men are just manly men, I guess.
And again, he's trying to establish Middle Earth as very similar to Europe and these different areas and these different regions and stuff like that. Like in the next movie, we go to Gondor, which is the other big neighboring country and the one that Saruman attacks next.
Okay.
Or
The
Sauron.
reason I brought it up is I always think of elves as being small, like, I don't know, leprechauns or what have you. But I guess the reason he made them tall was because the hobbits were small and hobbits
And
were
the
like
dwarves.
his thing, a new thing.
Yeah.
Elves are in other stories. I don't know that hobbits are.
Well, a lot of times in precursor stories, like you said, you picture elves as like fairies.
Right.
Elves and fairies are little,
Sprites.
or elves work at Santa's workshop and they're wee, and
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Okay.
right. Whereas in this one, he changed the hierarchy so that the elves are tall, the humans are in the middle, dwarfs are
And they're
next, and then the
strong.
lowest ones are halflings or hobbits.
Yes. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I was just
And it
curious
gives
because
them,
when I was reading this, if I'd have read it, I would have pictured the elves as small until he clarified that probably.
well, and when you think about it, D&D, we mentioned it in the last one, Dungeons and Dragons is the biggest key from Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
That gaming system and everything came from these archetypes. You're a warrior, you're an elf, you're a dwarf. That's what they are. And you can be a magic user, or you can be a warrior, or you can be an archer. All of that came from Tolkien's world.
Okay.
You mentioned it just in briefing, but it is true. These are all Groot's ancestors from Guardians of the Galaxy, the
Mhm.
Ents. We can't go without saying Rings of Power. Rings of Power is the new influence of this. So basically, it's the new series that's running on AMC, and it is the prequel to all of this. So it is the first arrival of Sauron and how he becomes evil and tries to take over Middle Earth.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I might be interested in watching it after we do the third one of these. I don't know.
Oh, I think you would like it even now. It was pretty good. It's kind of a mixed bag, the first season. I haven't seen the second season yet, but I've heard it's strong. But you find out, like think of it this way. The wizards in these three are there's basically Galadriel, who is an elf, and then you've got Gandalf. The Rings of Power is when they're young,
Okay.
before they become master wizards and everything.
Okay.
So like you said earlier, taking a whole group of a whole story and telling it out of order, and or looking back at prequels and all of that, you would probably like Rings of Power, because it's also how were the rings created. Because remember, the whole story is that all of these rings were created. You had however many, I can't remember, like 3 for the elves, 5 for the dwarves, 7 for men, because those are who become the Nazgul, and then 1 ring to control all of them. And this whole epic storyline is about destroying that 1 ring before evil captures it again.
I have
In a nutshell.
Camelot.
As you should. It's medieval. It's knights.
It's knights and there's lots of battles. And actually, I have Le Mordor tour as well because that was where Camelot basically came from. Or no, I guess the legends of Camelot probably became Le Mordor tour because they were probably told by mouth before they were written down.
Well, and think about it as a prequel or as a precursor. If we're talking about keys, then I am sure J.R.R. Tolkien was influenced by Mallory and Lord of the Rings, and I mean Idols of the King and everything else.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then I also put down some more fantasy type movies, 2 that just wanted to be this good, which would be like Willow and Legend,
Yeah,
because they were made in the 80s and didn't have the technology we have now to make a movie of this scale. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
I would.
I
So
can
I would.
see Willow. Legend is more of a demon romance story to me. Always has
Okay.
been. It's the
I just think of it as Ridley Scott trying to do fantasy.
yeah. It
It's
is
basically.
totally is.
But yeah, okay, I can take that off then. But I do think Willow. Well, Willow obviously is a hobbit, even though he may not be called that.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have The Sword and the Sorcerer, which I always mention because it's one of my favorite B movies from the 80s.
Yeah.
And Richard
That's a good
Mall
one.
just died recently, and he's in it.
That's a good one.
Richard Mall, Richard Lynch.
I had Iago, of course, so that's Othello by Shakespeare.
That's great. I had not even thought of that, but he is very much a Iago type character.
And I was going to challenge you, is there another bromance couple like Frodo and Sam that you can think of? There's been a lot, but I just can't think of any right off the top of my head right now.
Murtaugh and what's his face in Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, that's what Lethal Weapon. We both
said
went
the
there.
Same thing. That's hilarious.
We both went there.
His name is, one of them's name's
of
Murtaugh, but I can't remember what the other one's name is.
Oh, and you've got, but there have been, I think it's very interesting that J.R.R. Tolkien tells this story without it having homoerotic overtones. I think sometimes Sam does and plays that, Mr. Frodo, but in the book, you don't get that hint. You just get these incredible friends who love each other and would do anything for each other. And I think that plays well in the movies, but it sometimes seems forced to me. I think I said that in Fellowship too. Sam gets on my nerves sometimes.
Does he?
With his, yeah, what do you need, Mr. Frodo? I'll do anything. Don't trust Gollum. He's mean. He's always upset. So there's that. I just mentioned it.
I think there's some homo subtext in there. You know I'm going to go
Okay.
there.
Okay. I was waiting. I've been trying to mention it. Well, you know, those hobbits hanging out in the Shire.
There's a lot of homo subtext in the Arthurian, however you say that word, legends as well, because
True.
all they talk about is the love of the brotherhood and how Arthur loves Lancelot as much as he loves Guinevere. I'm like, well, is he bi? What's going on here? Who knows? Because back then it was not written as openly, or at least not in the Middle Ages. Maybe in ancient times it was. But so who knows? And plus, coming from a gay guy, I'm going to see that.
You could say the same thing about Legolas and Gimli. All of their dialogue is like a married couple. Even when they're in the battle and they're trying to tell each other how many people they've killed.
That is funny that they have that little competition going.
That's 2. And he goes, I'm on 7.
Yes. And it's very Monty Python because of the way they quip it. I mean, it's 7.
Yeah, and they're very caring about each other. Don't tell the elf.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But I also appreciate the other side of it. Of course, I'm going to see the homo subtext, but I also see the subtext of love going beyond sex as well. The love of fellow man, the love of your brother, what have you. Bromance, for lack of better words. That too.
Definitely. That's what I was hinting at. I think he does that very well in this film, showing the sacrifice that these people are willing to make for each other kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't think of any other examples. I think it's funny that we both thought of Lethal Weapon, though.
There's obviously something there. We need
funny.
to rewatch it and go back.
That first movie is really good from what I remember. Anyway, that's all the keys I have. I ended with Lethal Weapon. Did you have any other things you want to say?
Nope.
This
I have
is
no
the
more. I love
conclusion.
it. Can't wait to see the third one.
Yeah, this is the conclusion of our middle movie of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. We'll probably pick up the third movie this time next year when we come around January. In continuing with that, we're going to go over onto my side next week into a movie that is not necessarily a horror movie. It's a little more suspenseful. And then we're going to do maybe a little dive into a different kind of sci-fi the following week. And then we'll get back into our traditional horror and sci-fi going forward throughout the rest of the season. We just want to take a little break, jump into some other genres, try to change things up a bit, make it a little more interesting. We'd like to know what you think. And hopefully you don't mind that we're doing this, because I'm certainly enjoying it. This podcast/YouTube show is not our only show. If you like what you hear, we have some other short shows on YouTube, as well as some subscription-based content and free content over on Patreon, including shows that dive deeper into television programs, including Star Trek, the original series, which is called the Dilithium Chamber, and X-Files, X-Files Declassified. So if you want, we could always use your support. You could go over there for the price of a cup of coffee, black, monthly. You can get these shows as well. Just think about buying us a cup of coffee. And until next week, David, I will be seeing you.
I will see you then. Have a good one.
All right. I bid you adieu, Sir Frodo.
Watch out for Mount Doom.
Can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.